Welcome, all the listeners. I'm Dr. Kathy Obear, Center for Transformation and Change, and I am particularly excited about these two fabulous guests, Kim Baker-Flowers and Beth Douthirt-Cohen, and I'll introduce them in a minute. But we are doing part 4 of insights from senior diversity officers. Your organization might call them VPs or vice chancellors or senior chief diversity officers. I do tend to try not to use the word chief, given the unintended or the impact for folks who are indigenous, and that's the language many people are using. So how do you keep an equity, inclusion, social justice focus and frame in this time of crisis management? What I love about being able to be with you two in part 4 is, in some ways, each of these reflects the moment in time where we were. The first one, we were about a month into this pandemic, and as you saw, I can see my body, people were like meeting daily, often as executive leaders, and there was a frantic urgency, speed. I'm not sure that's shifted as people are looking at budgets and layoffs and furloughs. And the people I'm talking with this is my 11th week, some people 12th, 13th week of sheltering, may be in a place of reflecting, where have we been, what are we missing, and how do we really look at the scenarios, particularly in higher ed, which is where you both are. But folks listening might be corporate, they might be nonprofit, they might be K-12 and other organizations. So sheltering in place for so many with all of our privileged identities, and week 12 or 13 of essential workers putting your life on the line daily. So all of that's happening in higher ed and other organizations. So I'm excited to come and say, how are people planning now for the future, moving in place, and particularly how are we getting senior leaders keeping an equity inclusion lens? So first, let me officially welcome you all. Let me start with Kim Baker-Flowers. I was trying to remember when we met, but what I know is, as you are currently the University Diversity Officer at California State University, East Bay, and y'all already announced you're doing full online services teaching for the fall in California State. Mm-hmm. But that's when I knew you, 4 or 5 years now, Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington and y'all brought us to Portland Community College, mm-hmm. where you were the senior diversity officer there. And so over some Chinese dinners and some other meals, just really had a chance to get to know you over the years. So, so excited. In a moment, I'll let you say more about yourself. But I also want to just acknowledge Beth Douthirt-Cohen. I couldn't remember how we met either. I thought it was the Social Justice Training Institute. And so for years, actually both are alums, but Beth, you were an alum, and as a white identified person, I remember going, you got my attention. And then as you've gone through intern and now you're in the next generation faculty development program, as we've talked, your strategic thinking, you also ask questions that I haven't ever thought about before. And Kim, early on, I was so impressed with your strategic thinking and resilience hanging in there with well-intended, particularly white people, but folks like me with many other multiple privileged identities, just that long-term strategic work. And Beth, you're currently the Executive Director, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, the Chief Diversity Officer role at Frederick Community College. So that's why I was excited, because you both have community college strategic executive equity inclusion work. And Beth, you were the former Deputy Chief Diversity Officer at Maryland College Park. And so just very excited, again, significant 4-year experience and community college experience. So as I take a deep breath, and just to start, Kim, why don't you start us off, then I'll go to Beth. Just tell us a bit more about yourself and maybe how you got to this work and your passion for it, particularly in this pandemic.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me today. I'm really excited to have this conversation and dialogue. I'm originally from Kansas City, Missouri. So that is a hyper-segregated city. And just growing up, you're very, very aware of race. You're very, very aware of the impacts. And I remember in high school, I got really activated because of things that I saw as injustices. And they were, appropriate teenage injustices. Like my music wasn't being played at a high school dance. And, I got activated and had a petition and signed. And I very much developed an interest in civil rights and was inspired by folks who had come before me. Went to law school, and that experience itself, walking along those hallways,
Mhm.
being one of only 7 in my class that are African American, feeling and being name called, being told you're basically an affirmative action um, student, going up against all of that, and then having no one in administration to advocate for us that we could go to. It was a very, very isolating experience. And I remember thinking, no one, shouldn't this be this hard for anyone to just try to get through school, especially law school, where it's this very intense academic environment. And I fell into higher ed, doing primarily external and internal community building work at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and was very fortunate to have a boss who nurtured this desire around diversity and social justice in me and let me just explore and work on initiatives. And I quickly found that I could be that voice. I could be that person that could speak out, that could advocate, that could plan, and to try to create this more kind of supportive, inclusive um, environment for students. I don't believe that we should be creating these artificial hierarchical barriers just because they've always been that way. And that's part of my passion that keeps me fueled right now is it's for me in my lens, it's very, very simple. Um, if you're trying to act equitably, you do and you give the student, the faculty, the staff, the things that they need individually in order to be successful. What do we have to do to create those environments that make that happen? Yes, you can say that capitalism and all the other isms come into play and are what you're fighting daily. But I've seen enough change, I've seen enough transformation, individual growth that I know that there's always possibilities. And that's what keeps me fueled. That's what keeps me going in this current pandemic. It's gotten a little bit harder just because I'm at home and I have a son who is 20 and he's very, very good at it. And he is not happy at being stuck in the house with me. And we're in an apartment in California, so it feels it's very, very tight. But I am very much fueled by, I know what his educational experience has been. I know that I have been a fighter and advocate and all kinds of things as mom to him, trying to get him through because he's an African American male. I know that a lot of these things still exist. And again, that's part of my passion and part of my fuel to, I can make things different. I've got the education and background and the desire and the passion to change, to make change, positive change. And that's what keeps me passionate. That's what keeps me fueled. And that's especially what's keeping me going right now because just honestly, it gets hard some days, um, especially now, but that is my primary motivator right now.
Thank you. And I just love getting to know you even more as you shared and the running on fumes. That may not be
Mhm.
you, but I'm hearing that a lot. My gut said. And so, how do you all in your senior roles, much less empower others throughout the organization to keep going and care for the caregivers? So,
Mhm.
Beth, come on in. Passion, how did you get here? Just enough, so we get to know you and then we'll just leap in.
Yeah, I really appreciate hearing your story, Kim, and I'm excited to meet you because we've not met before. So I'm grateful to you, Kathy, for bringing us together to have this opportunity. I think maybe similarly, high school was definitely a turning point for me. I went to 6 different schools in 12 years, and I think, and it was not because we moved, right? So for some families, that's the reality, and that was not necessarily my reality. And it was definitely, I think, when I look back on my journey, a lack of belonging. And parents who are like, we're going to find you a space, right? We're going to find you a place where you can thrive. And we're going to figure out what that place is, right? And had the means, the class privilege, right? The white privilege to be able to do that. in some ways. And so I think that began my journey in high school. Definitely, I was like, why we can make this a better place, and this can be a place for more people. And definitely started becoming grounded in identity, and maybe that was also the identity politics of the late '90s. Definitely, I think had a role in that as well for me. So what's happening in the world. I think for me at this moment, what's really keeping me passionate about this work is this time is just exaggerating what we already know in this work, right? So it is just exaggerated to a level that I find myself someone who every day in, day out is decoding, right? Unpacking my own stuff, the stuff of the world around me, the racism, the classism, the sexism, the ableism, right? All of those isms. I just find this time to be a time where it's exaggerated in ways that I would not have imagined in January, even though I thought it already is so exaggerated, right? So the unequal suffering, this idea that I actually am safe, both me and my partner, and most of our family are able to telework. Some of us have lost portions of our jobs, and yet I feel so unsafe, right? And so this reality of this time that there's this weird unsafety, right? Lack of certainty, chaos. And so bringing the possibility of justice during a time like that, during a time like this is essential to me, and essential to what I've done throughout my life and what I want to be doing now.
I have so many questions. A new thought I'm having that folks are not only, will I have a job? Has my job changed? We already have family members, so I have been furloughed, laid off. What's the future? And then with the murder of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor,
Either or Tyler, yeah.
Tyler, and so many folks we don't know. And then the anti-Semitism, the class. So people maybe quote in our homes and not have pandemic fear as much today, and yet the virtual violence. So with a whole context, let me come back to you, Kim. Just what are you noticing in this kind of current time around the pandemic? How are senior leaders and leaders throughout the organization thinking about equity inclusion? How are you all as senior diversity officers taking those risks to again raise the issues, even though there's probably a emotional and political cost? The story and what I'm hearing is before there was cost for senior diversity leaders, but now in this time of just kind of crisis, I'm hearing that folks are getting moved out and not listened to, and actually you're not in the meetings where you need to be. So start wherever your heart is. It's just, what are you noticing, and leaders, and what do we need to be doing?
So I'm feeling just really fortunate right now as a diversity officer, just because I've got the team on the cabinet that I sit with. Because our governor last week on Thursday dropped this $54 billion deficit bomb, and gave us the 6-page document for the CSU that had listed out all the cuts that are going to happen. And so we've been in this kind of stressed, we're back to meeting quite a bit more often to try to figure out, how do we balance the human impact and how do we balance this institutional impact. And my boss, Liro Marishta, I'm just really grateful that I'm sitting where I'm sitting, has been really intentional and thoughtful, and hasn't made any kind of capitalistic kind of, logical, just let's do this and this and done. We've had actual dialogue. I was able to, he gave us a question, and he asked us to think about it over the weekend. I was able to use critical race theory. I used identity cards, did an analysis, wrote it up, and we had the conversation about it at cabinet on Monday. So again, I'm feeling really grateful about we're being as intentional as we can be, we're being as thoughtful as we can be, trying to balance, again, these realities, because that 10% has got to come from somewhere. Um, but also trying to put people first. And I lived through the other recession at another institution, and it's the complete opposite kind of approach at this one. So I'm very, very grateful that we're trying to be thoughtful, that we're trying to be intentional. I've been permitted, and it's not so much permission. It's just the culture, I think, of the leadership at the place that I'm at right now, where we're able to dialogue, we're able to at least have the conversation, and I feel as if I'm being heard. Whereas in other institutions, it felt like I was very much, hitting my head up against the brick wall. And I was trying to figure out creative ways to go under or over or sideways to get people to actually, and that's across the table, everyone on cabinet, to think thoughtfully. And I feel like I've got that right now. So I'm just feeling really, really, really thankful because I've got the trauma from the last time, and I'm trying not to let that influence the way that I behave and react this time. So I'm holding both of those things, and I'm able to have voice and advocate. And I don't right now really feel as if that I have to be measured, because again, I've got this luxury and privilege where I sit right now currently, where I feel as if I'm empowered to be and show up as me and say, and my boss is used to me saying. So I'm very, very grateful for that.
Well, that gives me hope. And I don't hear your story as often as I hear others from senior leaders. Could you share, and if not, what was the question that your president asked the leadership team over the weekend to ponder? I just love that as a practice.
He was talking about the different scenarios about trying to repopulate the campus. What could that look like? What should we be doing? And I'm trying to remember what the other question was. It was primarily about how do we get back to what this post-COVID normal will look like, while again trying to ensure safety, ensure that all the different identities, those who have caregiver responsibility, all these things are being held at the same time. And I got to tell you, it's extremely challenging. There were some questions when I was running it through critical race theory. I was like, I don't even know. I don't have an answer. So yeah, we're still wrestling with a lot of that.
But to have the senior leader hold people first, all of our mission, vision, values, priorities, and that includes equity, inclusion, lens, full breadth of differences. What a practice that is. So Beth, what's coming up for you as you hear Kim, and also just what are you noticing either on the campuses you know about? You don't have to talk about specific ones, just what are leaders, the challenges and the strategies they're using or the gaps they're finding?
Yeah, I feel like this time has, it exaggerates the strengths of institutions and the struggles, right? So for me, at least, that's the way it's felt. And I'd actually argue that's maybe people too. So I'm like, my strengths are rocking right now. My struggles, they are all over every Zoom screen, right, out there. And so it's, I think that has been what I'm seeing at my own institution, at other institutions. And so one of the things I'm really grateful for, I've been thinking a lot, and I've checked in on some chief diversity officers, senior diversity officers who are new in their roles in the last, I know of one who started in January, right? I'm 2.5, almost 3 years, it'll be 3 years this August, into my position. And one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is the work that we've done as a campus in building people's capacity to ask questions around equity and diversity and inclusion, right? To get kind of foundational questions. Who are we talking about? Who are we not talking about? Decoding, right? Whose experience are we not thinking about? How do we even figure out whose experience we're not thinking about, right? Making space and making room for hearing lived experiences, right? Hearing all of that anecdotal experience. I mean, that's the way it's thought about, right? Anecdata data about what people are experiencing, and really incorporated it into how we're thinking. And so the capacity building, I feel like, that we've done has been really helpful in this time. I emailed a group of deans, I think earlier this week, and said, hey, I know there's these 3 meetings that are coming up and I can't do all of them, right? Like, do you all have it? Right? Do you have the equity questions? What can I do to support you in that? And the deans replied very differently, and they were all great responses, right? One dean's like, okay, so I think we have the parent perspective, and I think we have the a perspective around people who have chronic health issues or in over 60, and I think we have the most vulnerable populations in these ways, right? And we're able to kind of name that and list that as we think about this. These are also meetings connected to returning and what that would look like. And so I was so grateful to their capacity to be able to name how they were going to approach these conversations. And also ask questions. What about this? Or have you heard about other institutions that are doing that? And that's been something we've really been focused on as an institution, is we do not have to reinvent all these wheels. There are institutions with many more resources, many more people thinking about that, and they need to share with us how they are approaching certain things, right? So that we can adjust to our context, because as Reverend Dr. Jamie Washington always says, right, the context before the content. And we need some content, because as our provost said in a meeting a few weeks ago, I didn't learn all this in provost school, right? Like, this was not covered, right? And I really appreciated him saying that, because it's true, right? Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a little bit of a snapshot of also from I think a somewhat positive perspective. I will say that the struggles are real, right? There's always the instinct towards equality. Let's just do the same for everyone. We'll offer everyone the same thing. And then at least we've been, quote unquote, fair, right? So equating fairness and equality, and being like, okay, and that's not equitable. Mm-hmm. Because we know there's profound differences in struggle right now. And so how do we, given the breadth of the struggle, right, how do we address that? Both the breadth and the depth of the need. And that is not easy. And so I have been grateful to people, even when they're like, please, can we just do the same thing, right, for everyone, holding the idea of, or what would equity even look like here? I can only imagine equality. So what would equity mean?
Mm-hmm. So many great ideas from you both. We're about to go to break. I'm going to ask you, how can people contact you? But a couple quick ideas I'm getting from listening for senior diversity officers that are newer, really seeking out those mentors, or just putting out a call. I'll start a call, like I'll have a Zoom, can other folks join? And really seeking out peer and aspiring institutions, whether it's California State is already organizing all the senior diversity officers, and other types. That's what I've loved about bringing people together. We had someone from a Christian university and someone from a more Southern university. And so, and folks who are 2, 3, 10 years, 15 years in, how can senior diversity officers support others? And the other idea of inviting yourself to meetings, but realizing you don't have the capacity. So really coaching and consulting senior leaders who are running those meetings. As we move to break, could you each just share, how could people contact you if they just have a few more questions? And you both do coaching and consulting, I know. And so if you'd like to share how they could use you, and we'll do that again at the end. Just Kim, why don't you just kind of, if you're willing to share, how can people find you?
Yeah, so my email, my Cal State email is kimberly.bakerflowers@csueastbay.edu. That's the easy, I'm on it all the time. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me, and I'm happy to have any kind of dialogues.
Fabulous. And Beth, how can people find you?
So my email is beth.douthirt-Cohen@gmail.com. So it's exactly as my name is written, but no spaces, no hyphens, no dots. Just beth.douthirt-Cohen@gmail.com. And please feel free to reach out.
And as always, drkathybear.com/events, EVENTS. You'll find some of my free resources. They're also on the radio page. My book, In It for the Long Haul, this could be a great time for people to look at self-care and community care. What have we been doing and what do we need for the next month, 2 months? Folks are exhausted, burning out, and we have to be prepared for the next few months, much less second and third wave. There's a video of me teaching about self-care. And then navigating difficult situations. Folks can get access to a course for free, at least through August. How do you navigate? Our own times were triggered as well as when others, and it's a free 6-hour video. And then if folks want to learn more about designing, facilitating workshops, equity inclusion, anytime, but particularly in these times, designing, facilitating workshop is a phenomenal, I believe, self-paced virtual course. It's hybrid. So, and always I'm here to, how can I support you? So thank you all. I can't wait to come back afterwards as we're looking at, as senior diversity officers, how do we position equity, inclusion, social justice in everything we do and get the entire organization empowered and doing it. So thank you so much. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Kathy Obear, Center for Transformation and Change. So excited to continue this dialogue with Kim Baker-Flowers and Beth Douthirt-Cohen as we continue to look at, in this current context of pandemic, several months in, looking at summer, looking at fall, and then possible second, third waves. Just keep breathing. How are we getting leaders, supporting them to have an equity, inclusion, social justice lens in everything they do in crisis management, urgency? When my experience, when I'm into crisis, I kind of fall back on old thoughts, old biases, and I may not be making thoughtful decisions. And so as we're coming back, what are some other ways you're noticing specifically you've asked leaders or leaders on their own or keeping an equity lens, or specific changes you're making that'll show people even now what they could be doing to better serve the full breadth of folks, students, staff, faculty, incoming students? So we've gone to Kim first each time, and if you want to go first, it's great. And I can also flip it up. Just what are some other specific ways that you'd recommend to keep equity inclusion on the screens?
I think for me, it's, and I'm at the point in my career where I'm just showing up as me. I can honestly say maybe 5-10 years ago I wouldn't have. It would have felt too risky. But at this point, I'm just I feel very much I can say what I need to say. I can be that voice. I can be that advocate. I can be the activist and the accomplice as necessary. And I'm pretty fortunate right now that I do have leadership, at least on cabinet, that I feel we've got enough of a rapport where they understand I'm going to say the things. And there's usually a thoughtful kind of, at least I know they're going to think about it before they decide to do something. That's, I feel pretty assured. Now, when we go a layer down, that's when things sometimes might get a little bit more challenging because you have folks who are holding things, and you know we got the tension between efficiency and equity, and because of hierarchy and institutional racism, efficiency is usually going to win out. So what language do I need to use? Is it the business case? Is it, what is it, especially under the pandemic context? I'm oftentimes trying to scramble and figure out, okay, what are the words that I need to say? There's magic words. I don't care what anyone tells. There's particular words that you can say where you capture folks' attention, and they'll engage. And it feels like I'm struggling more and more around finding that language that will resonate for each of these different pockets. Like, for example, with faculty, it's this tension between asynchronous and synchronous learning. We know that students of color don't do as well in asynchronous environments. And my particular institution is predominantly students of color. So, but because of safety, we're pretty much going to be in an asynchronous environment. So me coming up and saying, but we need to be equitable and we need to give our students what they individually need in order to be successful. They're like, well, how do we do that? And so it's trying, I'm trying to find the language and the creative ways to engage. And it's, sometimes I'm successful, but oftentimes it's like, it's a struggle.
I hear that, and I could be wrong, but like I'm doing a webinar tomorrow on how to use an inclusion lens in crisis management. And one of the strategies I'm suggesting is at this time, you pull people together and ask those questions that you're asking. What have you been doing? First, what have you noticing about whose needs are getting met and whose aren't? And then how have you been kind of on the fly adjusting? So whether it's the intersection of first gen students of color, low income students, maybe without interconnectivity, students with disability, and just asking those questions and going to strengths. And what else have you been thinking about that we can be planning for and do some systemic support so it's not all just individual faculty to student. So that's a real micro way of having people come together in all sorts of ways. Because my guess is you may be feeling the pressure, both of y'all, of like, I got to have the answers. I don't, but you know how to ask the questions and you bring community together. You're nodding, Kim.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so Beth, what other strategies, building on what Kim's talking about, either you want to recommend or you've seen or you've done at this moment to really support, especially as we move farther into the organization, equity inclusion into everything we do?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. I think there are certain ways that I've shifted how I do some of my work. So I often, when I teach grad courses around this type of work, I talk about the history of this work, right? That it used to be very prescriptive. We would tell people the language to use. We would tell them exactly, we give them scripts almost, right? So if you look at curriculum from, 25, 30 years ago, corporate especially, but across the board. And I find myself actually during this time being much more practical, much more grounded than I've ever been in this work. And so that has definitely been a shift for me, and I think has been super effective, especially with faculty who, in our context, faculty are the main contacts right now with students because they have to be, right? Because that's what the student is there for, right? Is that classroom. That is not to say our student affairs, which we call learning support in our institution, is very engaged, heavily engaged, but every single solitary student has faculty. And so really building faculty's capacity to know the resources of the institution, which we're always working to do, right? If you can relate to that, right? We're always working to make sure that that faculty know where they can refer a student to or what options there are. There's a lot more of that. And at the same time, balancing increasing instincts, right? So increasing the practical knowledge that is needed, but at the same time, the instincts around that. Because we can't prescribe what every scenario a faculty member is going to encounter with a student, right? And so that has definitely been great, I think, and very effective for our time. I really relate to this idea, Kim. I don't know if I appreciate you giving me language for it. The idea that I'm like trying to figure out how can we slow this conversation down, because that's actually usually what is needed to have an equity lens. And that is a very complicated thing to name or to ask for in a moment of urgent need. And urgent across every argument you can think of. The business model argument, the social justice model, right? We need expediency. People are struggling, people are suffering. We need responses. And so some of the things that I think we have used or utilized, the way you interrupt bias, you slow it down, right? Even 5 minutes slowing it down can be helpful, but that feels, that's hard in this moment. I would say one of the more effective things that have felt really important to me, and I've seen that this at other institutions too, is making sure the right people are in the Zoom meeting, right? Making sure that people who represent and are closest, right? It goes back to, I guess, Brian Stevenson's, even though this is not exactly how he was using the idea of proximity, right? Who is most proximal to this struggle? And so in our institution, that in some cases is students, in some cases it's members of our student affairs group, right? In some cases it's some of our faculty or staff. And so making sure that those perspectives are in the meetings. And so I've seen that as a big part of my role, that people can hear each other and talk to each other. We've had ongoing meetings where our academic affairs and our student affairs staff have been together in meetings, and it's not that they weren't before, but very regularly, to say, what are you hearing from students and how can we as deans, assistant deans, communicate to faculty what you're hearing, right? How can we help with that communication? Because I think communication is also a huge struggle right now across the board. So yeah, those are some of the things that I think have felt most urgent to me.
No one's yet mentioned getting students actively involved in some of these task forces, planning, and y'all might be doing it, but the people I've been talking to, no one is, getting their voices in through here's what I'm hearing. But to actually have our clients, our students in the room virtually.
Mhm.
Kim, other ideas that are coming up for you before I want to talk about resistance and yeah buts?
I'm trying to think, it's specifically as in regards to students. We have had students in many of the spaces where we're trying to thought partner on what do we do. Here towards the end, and this may get us towards the challenges. When I usually do at least a pulse check in all the meetings that I lead, and I ask people to describe their thoughts or feelings. And in the last 2 weeks, it's been primarily tired and exhaustion. And our students were in the middle of, struggling with finances, finals, finding spaces within wherever they, the places where they were to just be a student. And we're trying to honor all of that and hold it all at the same time creating community and holding space, which I think is a unique skill set that my division and my office provides to the institution. We're good at holding space and bringing people together in dialogue. But our students are, they're saying, I'm tired and exhausted. I'm like, well, at that time it was 8 or 9 weeks. What's going to happen in fall when it's going to be double the amount of time? And the students were already zoomed out. They're like done. We had recognition ceremonies and people were like, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. Great. I love that you're honoring me. Really don't want to do another Zoom. That kind of. So it's like, so in my mind, I'm like, so what happens when we're in October and, we're at that 8 or 9 week and pretty, I'm assuming that we're going to have experienced the same thing. And what are our creative solutions to, is there a different kind of modality? How do we engage? What are our, I don't want to default back to Zoom, but is that my only option? I mean, my mind is constantly on the spin of how do we keep folks in it, and students especially. It's, we're trying to figure out social media and different software and different ways to keep them in it, because many of them are expressing to us, and we did a just-in-time survey through the sociology department where they're really clear. They don't like this. They don't like this online stuff. And, again, the reality is bumping up against the desires and the articulated needs of the folks that we are here to serve. So again, it's this notion of how do you hold both at once and try to do it successfully. And that is my daily kind of struggle is, let's think out of the box. Let's think creatively. I love calling everything a pilot. We'll try it at least once, see if it works, see what sticks. That's the way I'm trying to engage folks, especially the students.
And that goes back to you're trying to go throughout the organization, people who may not be showing up in the way you wish they were. What magic word? So pilot, doing things differently now, trying it out, actually may help us avoid problems that are very costly and actually hurt our recruiting and retention down the line. that whole financial business case, I think, could work as we move into the organization. And let's just try it. I love it. As we just have a few moments left, let's look at resistance. And that's my language. But what if folks are doing it the old way? I don't care how we used to do it and who was getting hurt, unintended impact, who we serve differentially. I really think this is a time to ask everyone, what are you doing that's actually you never thought of you'd ever do, and who's it really serving, and how are people actually benefiting from the ways we're doing it? What can we keep? So either that way, or how do you deal with folks that are just wanting to go back to the old quote normal? The resistance, not think about equity inclusion. And I'll start with Beth and then we'll end with Kim. And I wish we had more time. Beth, what comes up for you?
A few things. I also am thinking a lot about the synchronous asynchronous question, because of the different things, the different needs. So, we have a large population of students with disabilities. It's the reason I'm loving being in community college as a person with multiple disabilities, right? Being able to be part of those communities. And so in some cases, for example, with interpreters, right? Synchronous spaces, the ability to make sure that interpretation happens, right, is a huge question. All students across the board, especially students of color, really need that community, right? They need the sense of belonging, and the sense that people are going to show up and help them learn the content of the course, and they're not going to have to do it alone, right? And so, but then we have students who have been called up in terms of military service, National Guard service, and so synchronous is not an option for them, right? So then you record it, but it's obviously not the same, right? And so really kind of navigating that. And I use that example, one, because Kim, you brought it up, and I appreciate you bringing it up, because I would love to talk to you more about how you're thinking about it for fall. But a lot of faculty want the institution to make a decision. And this is not just an FCC, like, tell us, right? Do you want us to do it synchronous? Do you want us to do it asynchronous? What are the expectations? Like, we need clear expectations at this point, right? And it's complicated and really looks different. And so kind of around this, I had polled my students for a grad course I'm teaching this summer, and 50% of my students said, yes, I could do synchronous, but it's not preferred. And 50% literally said, yes, it is absolutely preferred. It's the only way I can learn, right? And I'm like, all right. So what does that mean? And what does that look like for that student? And for me as a faculty member. So it's powerful for me to watch this in real time, kind of while I'm trying to teach, and the faculty struggles. And so one of the forms of resistance that I'm seeing is this struggle. And I wonder if it's unique to community colleges. I'm guessing it is to an extent, but maybe not in other ways, is this tension between just tell me what you want me to do, right? Also with, I think, fear, and this is national fear, this is not necessarily specific to my institution, of losing your position, right? Of losing your job. So just tell me what the expectations are and I'll execute them. And widely diverse disciplines, right, which need really different modalities. And so some of the resistance is, you can tell me this is good from a diversity, equity, inclusion standpoint, but how does that mesh with my discipline? And what does that look like? And so for me, the way that I've navigated that, other than having great colleagues who are willing to navigate it with me, is to ask the questions, right? Well, what about this? The creativity, right? Trying to be innovative. I have emailed random institutions in our country and said, hi, how are you all doing blah, blah, blah asynchronously, right? So really trying to build on the work that other people are doing and understand how to do, and maybe have more resources to do. So that we can support people in having, right, we're not going like this. The more we think kind of in a tunnel way, I think the less possibilities that are open to us, the less innovation, the less creativity. And it is hard to be creative in a time like this. And so that has been, I think, a huge part of my role is, what can we give me 24 hours? Let me try to think with some other people about options here. And I know that 24 hours is scary, and I'll come back to you with something, right, that we can move forward on. And so that's definitely one way that I've navigated the urgency, we have to speed this up. It has to be, we have to move on from it. So yeah, that's some thoughts.
Thank you. And Kim, what does that bring up? Or other ways when there's more resistance and like, let's just do it the old way? What comes up?
It made me think, and I don't know why I just went completely individual and personal, because I was thinking about this notion around fear, this notion around let's be efficient, let's do things quickly, and me showing up as a woman, as an African American woman in this position where there's hiring chills, where folks are afraid if whether or not their job is deemed valuable or essential. Diversity, that's a real um, that's a real fear, because in many institutions, diversity may not be seen as essential. And in this modality where we're talking virtually to each other, me showing up the way I do, I've been in places and worked in previous positions where I felt as if I was hyper surveilled in terms of how I presented and watching my facial expressions. And Zoom allows people to just look directly at your face. And it's like, so, the risk of that kind of courageous voice, ensuring that, you're all these thoughts of how you're showing up literally, how your face, how you're reacting, your fears, the social political, you had mentioned Ahmad, all these things that are happening, you're bringing your personal and professional, they're colliding because you're literally working at home. And it's all happening at one time. And you're trying to be clear-headed enough to be this courageous voice, all while, surveilling your, I mean, I think it can oftentimes feel overwhelming. I'm feeling very, very fortunate right now that I am where I am at, and don't feel as if I have to be as on, so to speak, as I needed to be in other places. But I do empathize with those who are in the position right now, especially coming out as chief diversity officers, standing out when it often feels like you're on a limb by yourself. And whether or not you've got allies, especially around your senior administration, that cabinet table, who will at least echo and reinforce what you're trying to say. It feels risky. But the only thing, and those are the biggest challenges. Again, I felt very much going internal in response to what Beth, that was what was coming up for me. But I do believe that we are standing in a moment where there's truly possibility for creativity. You are doing what is right. You are doing things that are in service to your students. And it may, not be a financial kind of a clear, tactile assurance, but understand that you are in solidarity with many folks across the nation who have been there, who are in your shoes, who are feeling just as sometimes just singular in their moment of trying to be courageous in voice. And I want to say for everyone that's listening, you are very much valued and appreciated, and I can empathize with many of those different emotions because they're coming up for me as well.
So powerful. What a way to end. Because so many folks, I think, are in that position. Do I take that risk? And we, with more privileged identities, particularly who identify as white, what's our role in being the one to speak up, ask the question, so folks of color literally are not putting their jobs on a line every time they raise the issue? And the idea of both and, urgency and equity inclusion, move fast and slow down. So both and. As we close, I'm so grateful for you both. Would you please just remind people how they can find you? Because I think you're going to get some calls and emails.
So my email address is Beth.Douthirt-Cohen@gmail.com. So it's just exactly as my name is written, no hyphens, no periods or spaces. Thank you so much, Kathy. I've really appreciated this conversation. It's been healing and helpful and grounding. So I'm grateful.
Mm.
Kimberly.bakerflowers at csueastbay.edu. And I echo what Beth said. Thank you so much, Kathy. I appreciate you.
I am so grateful for you both in my life and for the wisdom. Yes, having you both was wonderful. And again, folks, on the radio show page, you can find their emails, as well as you can always email me. And tomorrow, on Thursday, the 21st of May, I'm doing a webinar, how to use an equity, inclusion, social justice lens in everything we do in crisis management. So you can just go to drkathyobear.com/events, sign up. If you don't come, you can get the video, and that itself could be a way to build internal capacity, breadth and depth of the organization. You'll get lots of ideas and strategies. And I'm Dr. Kathy Obear with Center for Transformation and Change. So grateful for all the folks who are keeping equity, inclusion, social justice, a race lens in everything we do. It is not easy. It is a scary time. And it's an exciting time, as Kim said and Beth said. Possibilities. Bring people together for expansive thinking. That's what this next month or two could really be. See you next month, where we're going to have Dr. Robin D'Angelo on, looking at white fragility and how do you work with whites to really dismantle racism, create liberation in these times and in the future. Dr. Kathy Obear, till next time, all the best to everyone.